price, anything that has to do with price speculation.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll talk about all the business stuff.
Yeah. We speculate. That's what we do. That's what we do.
I'll leave that to you guys.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just leave that up to the oracles of cryptocurrency. Okay.
Oh, looks like we're live.
All right, we're live.
Okay, so let me double check here.
I'll mute when we're not talking then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just give me a couple of minutes to do the intro here, guys, and then we'll get the party started here. All right. Okay. All right, guys. If you guys can hear me, please let me know. Okay, Leon. Hey, could you say hello over there, Leon and David, they are broadcasting from the Factom headquarters, so that way we can make sure the audience can hear us.
Hey guys, this is Leon and this is Dave. We are at the Factom office here in Austin, Texas.
Hey guys,
okay.
How's everybody doing?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about the broadcast mishap, guys. For some reason, there was no start broadcast button on either side of us. We could not figure it out what happened, so we just had to create a new YouTube live stream feed so that you guys can see us. Because we could talk to I could talk to Leon and David from the Factom headquarters, but we weren't able to broadcast what we were discussing out to the public. But I'm glad that you guys can hear it. Okay. All right, guys. So we're going to go ahead and start this broadcast here. So now that everyone can hear us, let me just introduce everyone. All right. First of all, you guys know we got the Honorable Grand Master, LeonFu.com, the great oracle of cryptocurrency, the Oracle of Austin. I've made a ton of money just listening to this guy invest in different cryptocurrencies. Okay. Now, next to the Honorable Grandmaster LeonFu.com, we have David Johnston. David Johnston is the chairman of Factom Incorporated. In case you guys don't know, Factom is the cryptocurrency, and then we have Factom Incorporated, which is the company that does the software development for Factom, which is a open source public software, and then anyone can use. But the company Factom Incorporated is the one that actually develops it. And David Johnston is their chairman. He's also the main guy that does the investing for the public. He does not does the investing. I'm saying that wrong. He's in charge of the public communicating to the public about the different. How's the legal way to say this, David?
I work with investors that want to get involved in Factom Incorporated and really just help to educate them about what its capabilities are and the cool use cases that companies are starting to use Factom for. So I do essentially the investor relations for the.
Okay, yeah, that's the word I was looking for. That was stuck in my head. Investor relations. Okay, now on this broadcast, guys, we have to let you guys know something that is a little bit different from the previous broadcasts that we've done with different folks that are involved in cryptocurrency. Because Factom Incorporated is a company, and they are getting money and funds from the public, from investors that want to invest in Factom Incorporated and stuff like that. We have to be careful because there's certain, for legal reasons in the United States of America here, there are certain legal questions that regards Factom Incorporated that we cannot ask David. Okay, for example, anything that has to do with the price of the factoids that's being traded at Poloniex or any exchange, he cannot discuss about that because in the U.S. there's certain SEC regulation and laws that prevent people who are in charge of investor relations not to solicit funds publicly or anything like that. Okay, so what we're going to discuss in this interview, guys, in this hangout with David, is the business side of Factom Incorporated, and see what they do, the kind of customers that they're going after, what they do that's different from other cryptocurrencies and things like that. But as far as the price of the factoids that are being traded, we're going to avoid that. And LeonFood.com and I will discuss that in a separate video without David being here, because we don't want him to get in trouble with the SEC in the United States. And in case you guys don't know, the SEC is like the police that's in charge of all companies that are raising money publicly in America. So we have to abide by their laws. Okay. So is that a little bit clear right there? Okay.
Yeah. We'll just communicate. The rule is basically we communicate directly with investors on a private basis, and there are just a lot of laws that the SEC has about public solicitation. So we're not looking for investment. We're not using this as an avenue to sell shares or securities. So we just want to, what we can do is happy to talk generally about the technology, can talk about, the use cases for the company, and really, just education about what we do.
That's the key.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
You guys are the investment folks. I'll let you, talk about that separately, but happy to be here and happy to sort of talk about what we do.
Yeah, so, and the reason why we have to mention that, guys, is because there's certain questions about Factom that you will want us to ask, and we're not going to ask them because we already know in advance that that's going to violate certain SEC laws, so we're not going to do that. Okay, so let's start with the business of, from my understanding, David, right? The business of Factom Incorporated is to record public data or important data that the public does not want to be erased, and you guys have the software technology to record that data into the Bitcoin blockchain, which is not once it's recorded on there, it cannot be erased. Okay, so that's the easiest way to explain it, guys. Like today, I saw on your website that you guys just partnered up with a company that will record all the stock market prices into the Bitcoin blockchain. Is that correct, David?
Yeah, and just to clarify that a little bit, this is actually a partnership that we've had ongoing for a number of months. And if folks have looked at our public usage chart, which lists all the different Factom chains, if you've seen the one that says Intrinio, actually been this stuff actively being published to the Factom network. So the cool thing for developers is this is a resource that's not available in the future, it's available today. So what we've been doing with Intrinio specifically is the Russell 3000 index. So these are the 3,000 most valuable stocks in the United States, right? All your big, Apple and IBM, and all those folks, right, are listed in the Russell 3000. What we do is we take the API data from Intrinio, and every 15 minutes we publish the price of all 3,000 of those stocks. And essentially what this is giving developers is a tool where they can now build an application and they can go look at an immutable record of what that price was.
Okay, so what is the advantage of what they could always look up the price, but
Sure.
by going directly to Infinity. So what do you bring to the table what can you, after you
Sure.
write this blockchain out, can you explain to our audience,
Sure.
what is the advantage of that versus what developers were doing before?
So one advantage is the fact that it's always going to be there, and it's not a question of you having to store that information locally, right? So what people do today, if they have an application, is they're pulling that data in. Maybe they keep it for some, they kick it out of their system because they don't want to store.
Storing it now.
So now it's actually in the Factom network. This is not being hashed. It's not being encrypted.
Really?
It's literally the raw data.
So you're now, it's not just a hash of the data, you're
That's
actually incorporating the actual data in the blockchain. Now, doesn't this take up a lot of space?
Fortunately, this is a use case where it's a very small footprint.
Okay.
So if you think about how many characters or bytes are involved in a stock price, it's relatively small. And since Factom really allows you to take a large amount of data, and of course this is all getting included in the Factom layer and then anchored to the Bitcoin blockchain, you're extending that immutability and security from Bitcoin to all of this data that we're adding on top. In most private use cases, you would want to hash or you would want to encrypt the information. But since this is public data about public companies that is generally useful to all sorts of developers, we thought, hey, this is a good example of a useful public data set we could put directly into Factom the developers can use. And so not only one, do you have a higher level of trust that the data is not going to be altered. Two, you don't have to store it locally in order to reference it. Three, it's verifiable not just by you who have access to the API, but now it's verifiable by anybody else who's using your application. They don't have to trust that you pulled the data correctly, buried somewhere in their code. They have a public reference that they can go and say, yeah, that's exactly what it says in Factom.
Now you're paying, Factom is paying for the servers that are hosting this? Or
so this is an initiative by the Factom Foundation. We have a general initiative that we call Factomize Everything, and that I've been pushing for a while. And this is one of the things that's come out of that is the Factom Foundation has provided the factoids in order to factomize all of this data from Intrinio for the stock markets.
Cool.
So here's the fourth advantage, though. It's not just Intrinio. We're doing this with all sorts of data sets. So if you saw our announcement last week, I believe it was, with Data Yes, our partnership with them is the 3,000 most valuable stocks in China.
Yeah.
So these are sort of different data sets that typically you wouldn't get from the same provider, and now we're pulling them into the same place. So if you're writing an application that needs to keep track of, let's say, global assets, now you're not, instead of doing two integrations with different providers, you can do an integration with Factom for this auditing directly. And yeah, you can always go to the source if you need more fine-grained granularity or ultra real-time type of data. You know, we're not trying to compete or replace these services, but we want them to be where the long-term records are kept and where the long-term historicals of an application can be stored and referenced over time. Like, we'll never have the room to put all the data that Intrinio provides, and we're not trying to do that. In fact, we want to point people to them now that we have this partnership to say, hey, you can see what they have available here. But over time, the goal is we're going to be pulling in APIs from tons of different providers, and you end up with a single place that you can go for all sorts of financial data all over the world. And hopefully the point is we're building a network effect. Once you have 10 or 20 or 100 or 1,000 of these different data sets, are you going to cobble that together yourself, or are you just going to show up to Factom and for almost free basically grab that data that you needed?
So also for the Homeland Security, it had something to do with sensor data, if I remember what the press release said.
So the press release covered the fact that this is identity related, and for them, they want to prove that records haven't been altered. I think what they said in the press release is, hey, we want to increase, transparency and have the ability for, there to be better record keeping. And I think their main pain point is, wanting to show people that, when it comes to the sensor data, that, everything it hasn't been tampered and it's all there and all the records are complete. And so what they highlighted in their press release was really about, using this for Internet of Things, using this for identity. And I think it's forward thinking of them to get involved with a blockchain company like Factom. And the cool thing is, it's getting delivered, it's happening, and it's not just a thought experiment, but it's
so one of the things that are that was in the troll box at Colonial is this. I don't know how much you can say about this, but is this something that is ongoing? Is there any expectations that they will continue this contract in the future, or is this something that is just like 200,000? It's a one-time deal. Is that something you can answer? Or?
I'll answer it at a broad level. I expect we'll continue to have a relationship with the Department of Homeland Security. I can't announce any new contracts today, but keep abreast of the blog, and you'll see.
But the intention is you develop this relationship, right? That's the intention of this is not just 200,000 or.
So that's a good thing. I can say broadly that the intention of this DHS project, which I can say has come out of their Silicon Valley office. So they opened this Silicon Valley office with a bit of fanfare recently, and have started sort of embracing innovation from the Valley. Factom, we have one of our offices, one of our sales offices in Silicon Valley in Sunnyvale at Plug and Play.
Sure.
And so that's where the relationship came from. And I can say that this program that they've launched in Silicon Valley, the whole point is to take things from pilot all the way to production and really embrace innovation.
So this is more of a research project. This $199,000 contract. It's not. It's more of like a proof of concept. Can you say, or if it's more?
It's the first phase in that process that they've created. You know, I can't make any claims about future contracts that they may or may not give us, but I can say yes, it's the first step in what they're trying to do is embrace innovation and bring that in. And access that. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Okay. There was one other contract that you had mentioned. This was before the DHS. It was a contract about China. Do you remember that?
Sure.
I could not find a Chinese company. Could you go over what that was? Because the price did jump. Like all of us looking at we're all investors and speculators here, and we saw the price react to that. And we some of my friends were like, who the hell are these guys? This guy. Maybe
we've announced a couple of partnerships, so we can pull it up on the blog. There's a few of them. But you're probably thinking of the first one, which was the iSoft partnership. North Beijing, where all the internet companies are focused. So I would best describe them as sort of the IBM of China, obviously a little smaller, but on that same vein of what they do, which is enterprise software solutions for large corporations.
Sure.
So if you look
they're not, well, no, like I tried to Google them and I couldn't find anything.
You want to Google their Chinese name as opposed to Johnston. That's their Americanized name.
Okay.
But we can post some links regarding that. But basically what they do, I had a chance to visit their headquarters in Beijing, meet their CTO, and their challenge is in China, there's a mandate for smart city data in 2017, meaning all the major cities have to go out and get smart city software that collects, I don't know, electricity consumption and traffic, and you would imagine, modern collects, and they have to. So there's this mandate, and so iSoftstone as an enterprise software company goes out and they go to all the cities and they say, hey, we have this software, we can provide you sort of all the different tools you need so you can be in compliance in 2017. And the cool thing is they realized, and I think this was well covered in the blog, was they realized, oh my gosh, with Factom, with the blockchain, we can prove that the data collected by the local sensors, by the municipality, hasn't been altered or changed when it gets reported up to Beijing. So you can almost think of it as compliance. Like they're literally showing they're complying with this mandate for next year when the smart city stuff all rolls out. And so they went and signed contracts, I think, some the iSoftstone software. And so for Factom, what we're providing is a means of proving that data and validating that data. Obviously, we can't handle the giant, pipeline of data that's going to come raw off the sensors, but what you want to do is aggregate that and timestamp it, so that you can do all those proofs. And
speaking of China, would you say that Factom, let's say 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, do you think the revenue for Factom Inc., would it be coming mostly from China or from the United States? Like, where are you focused on? Are you focused, because I know you guys spend a lot of time over there. So, like, what do you think is where this blockchain space is? Is it going to be mainly in China and Asia, or in the West?
That's a good question. So far, what we've seen is about half and half.
Half and half.
Between China and the rest of the world.
China and the rest of the world. Okay.
So that's sort of the balance of.
Well, that implies that the United States is less than China. If China alone is half, then
we only have a few of our customers. I can say we only have a few of our customers in the U.S. It's U.S., it's Europe, it's other Asian countries, but China is a major player in these.
Why do you, in your opinion, why do you think they're so moving aggressively into this versus the rest of the world?
I really have to give an enormous amount of credit to Bo Shen, Vitalik, and Ada and Mr. Zhao, all the folks behind Fenbushi Capital, who have really built a real ecosystem in Shanghai. I've ended up visiting China 5 times in the last 12 months, and it's mostly due to the hard work that they've done to really not just engage the community, but engage the larger business organization. So when I went to Blockchain Summit in Shanghai, it wasn't merchants, it wasn't exchanges, it wasn't cryptocurrency traders, it was major banks, it was insurance companies, it was huge financial institutions learning about the blockchain and seriously looking at how they adopted it. I mean, if you look what they accomplished with, you guys probably saw the announcement about the Chinese central bank starting to invite so much education with these large institutions in China. So I think it's that groundwork that they set, and then their continued sort of engagement of all those major institutions has really set it on a path where it's moving a lot faster than what I see in the US or what I see in other, because I think they get the opportunity. Have mostly been, how do we deal with the great? The Chinese reaction has much more been, oh wow, we can use this to audit this. We can use this to increase trust here. We can really solve sort of this. Some people have called it the Chinese.
Isn't that what Factom is about? Is reducing corruption?
Well, and this,
told me that in the past.
And this is the whole thing in China that often referred to as the trust crisis or the trust deficit. Right? People are concerned about food safety, all sorts of things, right? And all of a sudden, if you can audit all of those processes, you don't have to trust the other person, you can trust the math. Yeah. So that idea, I think, is really powerful and really resonated.
Hey, just real quick, guys. We're just getting some feedback from the audience. I think there was some lag right when you said, David, what the Chinese central banks were doing. Right when you mentioned that, I think there was some lag in the video and people could not hear it.
Sure. Well, I was just saying that if you saw announcements from earlier this year, the Chinese central bank mentioned being open to proposals about blockchain for the yuan. And that really makes them the first major central bank reached out sort of to technology. Anyway, I was just giving credit to the folks at Fenbushi and Wangcheng Labs for sort of laying the groundwork there. Vitalik spends a lot of time in Shanghai, and I think they really did the hard work of education and lobbying to really get those institutions to understand blockchain.
Okay, I have a question based on that. Every time when someone like these companies, any of these businesses record their data into the blockchain using Factom, what is the cost to do that? And how often is it being done?
It really depends on the use case. So let me use an example that folks might have seen recently in the usage chart. If you've looked at the usage chart recently, there's a big spike from Anchun, which is a notarization service in China that we announced a partnership with a while back, and they went through the integration process and started publishing hashes, hashes, encrypted hashes into the Factom network. And so in that case, we're working directly with them to help them publish that data and use it for validating the documents that they're notarizing, which is really, really cool because it sort of adds a whole nother level of dependability and confidence that, okay, yeah, we have this third-party service that's validating our document, but how do we know they're not cheating? This sort of gives you a whole nother level of confidence that you can check the math. So they're a good example. They've been putting in a lot of entries. I think they just crossed 100,000 entries in the Factom network. And that's a good example of somebody securing a large amount of data. It's helpful to understand that entries are not equal to records. because an entry in Factom is about 1K of data. So you can fit a bunch of hashes into a single entry. People often look at the 3 million entries and they assume that's the number of records. But I can is because we don't know who publishing the hashes are. They don't need any permission from the for-profit.
Right? Just real quick, when you explain that the difference between the record and the entry, it cut out. It cut out. You said that the entries were 1 kilobyte.
Yep, entries are 1 kilobyte, and so you can fit multiple records, multiple hashes into a single kilobyte. In fact, the hashes are usually 32 bytes, so you can fit a lot of hashes into a single entry. And so what I was just pointing out is there are actually now about 55 million records, and I'm using record as a term for the hash because I don't know what kind of record that hash represents. It could be a file, it could be a stock price, it could be whatever. But we have a little tool that adds them up, and we'll be releasing that fairly soon so people can see that. But there are about 55 million records in the system, and they're published in those 3.5 million hashes, 3.5 million entries, anchored by, I think we're now north of 50,000.
So but you don't know who these people are. I mean, you know some of them because they're clients of Factom Inc., right?
Yeah, we know some of them. Some of the chains people label. So they'll add a little bit of metadata and say title chain or documents chain or whatever chain. And we can usually kind of put the pieces together, especially if they put a URL in there, you know, like Moo chain. Like we didn't know what Moo chain was, but it's a metadata. We looked it up and it was a Chinese group doing proof of existence on top of Factom, who we had never met, and we're glad to see that they were using Factom. But that's the really cool thing about having an open source project at the bottom is people can use it without needing permission from the for-profit, and so you get a lot more network effect and cool data sets that people are adding.
So I think one thing our viewers would be interested in is we know that Bank to the Future, that you're raising part of your Series A on that. That's already on the website. Can you talk a little bit about so what's on Bank to the Future? Says it was 17% of the company at 5 million. That's what was on the website, right? And I've been sending out tweets that implies a $30 million valuation. If you take 17% of 5 million, that's 30 million, right? That's a little bit of math, right? Can you go over? But I think more importantly, I think our viewers would like to know is what are you guys going to do with this money? Like, what can you say? Like, how are you going to use these funds to expand the business? To do? Could you go over some high-level strategy about, as prospective investors, like where do you see this company going with now that you have more capital?
Yeah, sure. I can talk at just a very high level, saying that when we do fundraising, most of it goes towards engineers. Being a software development company, that's about typically, what you see in the market is about 2/3 of your cost goes towards engineers. So as we sign up these institutional customers, it's really a matter of serving them with technical support and developing our core products. So that's really what dominates the cost structure. And I think that sort of really captures it. Is it's really about building the team. We've said publicly, and you can look right at on Factom.com, that we've got a team of full-time folks involved in the company and the for-profit, and that's where most of our spend goes for supporting.
So you're going to increase headcount with these funds, then, like to hire more developers to build out.
We are hiring, so send in your resumes. Email Carrie@Factom.com. A variety of skills, front end, back end. really, sort of infrastructure level developers is a lot of who we engage.
Yeah, and so I guess that's a good lead into Milestone 2. Like, there's been a lot of talk publicly about like Milestone 2 that that
Sure.
it's highly anticipated that about what going to be able to do with Milestone 2 that they couldn't do before when it gets released.
Sure. So the best thing to understand is the milestone structure was first set out when we did the software sale in 2015. And basically what we outlined is we're going to evolve this to be more and more decentralized over time, right? So the first milestone, we call Factom Genesis version of the software went live September 1st in 2015. So we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of Factom being live. And fairly straightforward implementation where there'd be one federated server. It's anchoring into the Bitcoin blockchain. It can handle a few transactions per second, that type of architecture. So the big jump with Milestone 2 is it moves to 8 federated servers. And these are not all controlled by Factom Incorporated or the Factom Foundation, but we'll have a number of independent companies that have committed to running federated servers, and these will be spread out.
What kind of companies would do this?
Folks that have experience, I'll just say folks that have experience running
data centers,
folks that are in the blockchain space that have experience running servers and always keeping them up.
Miners.
That might be the type of company, and it might also be customers. People that use our software and put in entries themselves want to be involved in the network. So we'll try to mix it up. But there'll be, we're looking at 2 in China, 2 in the US, 1 in Japan, 1 in India, and 2 in Europe. So sort of have a real good broad base for the network. So this really moves to a peer-to-peer network. These 8 federated servers can handle.
Federated, does that mean Factom Inc. is going to pick them?
That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly
right.
So in Milestone 2,
okay, go ahead.
In Milestone 2, that's right. We anoint, if you will, the 8 federated servers. Behind them, there are 8 auditing servers. If any server goes down, the auditing server takes its place automatically. Yes, if you look at the milestone description that was published originally on Coinify, and I think is still floating around everywhere, is Milestone 3 is where we get to elections.
Elections, okay.
So this has proved really difficult in the cryptocurrency space.
I think BitShares does that, right? Kind of with a delegated proof of stake.
They do a delegated proof of stake. There have been some challenges with that. Other people have tried different flavors. For Factom, we wanted something that was based on the real users. And so we developed a delegated proof of usage. So it's actually the people that are making entries into the system, not people that are holding factoids, that will have that voice to directly elect the federated server.
So the people using it are the ones that get to vote.
That's right.
Who's it. Not like delegated proof of stake where you had to own the tokens.
Right. And so there's not an attack vector where you could buy a majority of the tokens and all of a sudden elect all of them. You actually have to spend the money to make the entries.
And then you get to vote.
And then you get to vote, and you only get to vote for a certain period of time. Well, I believe what was proposed in the consensus paper is 6 months. So you just got an aged voting, right? So after 6 months after you voted, you're not an active user. You only sort of get wait for when you're active, or a period of time after you're active. And we think that'll align well because ultimately you can have large users and customers that want the system to keep functioning because they're actively putting entries in the system. They ought to be the ones electing the servers. So when you get to Milestone 3, you're looking at 32 federated servers and 32 audit servers. So that's sort of the evolution, is we're getting more and more decentralized over time. We don't want to control the network. We don't want to be a bottleneck. We want this to be a fully decentralized system.
And one of the complaints for a lot of our audience is like people that trade on Poloniex, small investors, they've been complaining about a wallet. Can you speak more about like if that is coming?
I can say that is coming in a wonderful, beautiful interface from not from Factom Inc. Because we're not necessarily interested in being a wallet company, but from a wallet that's available today and has a very nice interface. We're hoping to announce that in conjunction with around the timing of Milestone 2. So as the public testnet rolls out and as we go into production, then you'll see the announcement around the wallet integration. What the reason it's connected to milestone 2 is because in milestone 2 you get a new capability called acknowledgements. So today Factom syncs with the 10-minute blocks of every 10 minutes on the 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So not even necessarily when a Bitcoin block happens, but we put in an anchor every 10 minutes, and really that's when you know your Factom entry has happened. When you get to the peer-to-peer network, you end up getting cryptographic receipts, which we call acknowledgements, from the federated servers immediately after you put in the entry.
Sure.
So it's around a second. So you're moving from waiting a while to know if that information has gone in to knowing very, very quickly. And so that makes it easy for wallet providers to show that entries are being made or that transactions are happening, because factoids are a token that operates on top of Factom.
But don't your customers need a wallet to hold an inventory of factoids for their own use? Don't they need
Typically
one?
not.
They don't.
Because the way we architected this with factoids converting into entry credits, all they need to be able to do is control the entry credit address. And make entries directly in the system. Or in some cases, depending on the piece of software they're using, Factom Inc. is making that on their behalf, right? Or we've connected the APIs in a way where we manage the entry credits, right? And this is on purpose. We wanted to get away from everybody having to have a wallet. We wanted large banks to not have to ask their lawyer if they're allowed to hold cryptocurrency, right? Or software tokens, or whatever it gets framed as. And so we wanted to very clearly say, you're not going to touch the money. Entry credits are non-transferable. Once they go to a public address, that's it. They're stuck there.
So you do it on their behalf. You can convert them to entry credits and say, here you go. These are actually just credits, and you can't use them for anything else.
All you can do is make entries in an immutable database. That's exactly it. So by removing all that complexity for large companies, I can't tell you how much that's helped in us getting these large customers. Because if they had to have a Bitcoin wallet or had to have a different wallet, it adds a whole nother layer of complexity. So if we can remove all that and say, you can make entries in the blockchain. Period. You pay us this much, everything is normal, all the complexities.
A tenth of a cent, right? That's the price. You want to make a credit, it's a tenth of a cent. Fixed rate doesn't really matter what the factoids are trading at. For them, it's a tenth of a cent.
Right, and that gives them confidence about, they don't know what the price of the tokens are going to be,
and they don't want to know either.
And they don't want to know, right? That's not their business. All they want to do is make immutable.
Hey, David, I want to just get a use case example so that the audience understands more of what Factom does, because sometimes when we talk about the stock prices and things like that, it may be something that's unfamiliar with the common people that are looking at Factom. I want to use this as an example. Maybe you can help us out. When my son was born in the Dallas County, in the city of Dallas, it was located in Dallas County in the state of Texas. We went to go to the Dallas County and we got the record, a copy of his birth certificate, and they charged us $25.
Sure.
And it was just a piece of paper, but what they mainly charged the $25 for was that they had to stamp it with the Dallas County clerk stamp. Basically they authenticated that the data that was on that birth certificate for my son was accurate and it's correct, and that's why they charged us $25. Now, if let's just say that the Dallas County or the hospitals in the Dallas County, instead of using their antiquated old record-keeping system, if they were to go and use the Factom system and record that birth certificate into the blockchain, so that in the future when my son goes to school, they can pull it up and identify his birthday, and then when he goes to school or when he goes to work or anything like that, what would be the cost difference? Because when it boils down to it, no matter how good we say a technology is, it always, for a lot of businesses, it comes down to the cost of record keeping. How much would it cost for the city of Dallas to record my son's birth into the blockchain if you guys were doing it?
So the funny thing is, I actually did this. I took my daughter's birth certificate and I put it in the Factom system as a hash of the photo. So it cost me about 1/10 of a penny per record, right? I mean, it's fairly straightforward use case, and probably something they could hire a developer to do directly onto Factom. You know, for Factom Inc., our focus is really on use cases where things are really expensive. So auditing and compliance, where people are spending enormous sums of money to make sure financial records are correct. That's really where we've ended up focused for the for-profit. But the cool thing is, yes, as an open source project, they could go on there and use the APIs, and 1/10 of a penny, they could add that record. Now, it's important to distinguish that hash is the verification, but it's not the storage of the raw record itself. So somebody, the person, the parent, the county, still needs to keep a copy of the digital record, and that's fine. That's easy. Keeping lots of replications of a digital document is a fairly solved problem, right? We're not going to reinvent AWS or all the places you can do, Iron Mountain or whatever for long-term storage of raw documents. But the cool thing is that now they can get rid of the physical copy, because the reason people still keep pieces of paper in the 21st century is atoms are hard to change.
Sure.
And until the blockchain, bits were easy to change.
That's right.
Right. And so even if you had a totally digital system, you still had to print out, a copy of that title, a copy of that record,
That's right.
and put it in the background because, well, what happens when something gets altered on the digital system? Well, you have to have something to go back to.
Sure.
So now you don't need that paper to go back to. Now you can have a digital copy in the background.
You want to
how many of those records? How many of those records will fit into an entry? Like, how many birth certificates can you fit into an entry? Is that
just divide 1K by 32 bytes. And that'll give you the number of hashes that you can put in there.
Mm-hmm.
So 20, 30, depending on how you're organizing them, if you include any metadata or things like that. But yeah, you can include plenty. To your point, you could probably spend less than 1/10 of a penny to secure a bunch of records.
But I think you had mentioned something about mortgages too. Like, this really comes into play when you want to, securitize different. I mean, that's a potential use case, correct? Mm-hmm. Where right now today we securitize all types of stuff. The most thing being a mortgage, and isn't that like one of the things that potentially, if Factom gets incorporated, that they could actually assist with reducing the cost of doing that, correct?
Sure, that's a good example. There's so many examples of record keeping intense use cases.
Yeah.
So if you want to pop your birth certificate in, it's not a lot of volume, right? It's a few records. I mean, if I'm doing it personally, obviously there's a lot more if you're the county of Dallas. But it's still not, millions or billions, right? There, a finite number of people born in Dallas County every year, probably, in the thousands or tens of thousands. Yeah. But the point is, where this really shines is use cases where a company has a huge number of entry. You talk to the folks at Johnston, for example, they've said their use case is it's millions of documents. They notarize something like 100 million documents a year in China. So that's an example where it would be really expensive to put that directly into the Bitcoin blockchain, but it's really effective to use Factom for. So yeah, any use case where there's a lot of records involved, and a lot of times these financial assets aren't one page, it's like 1,000 pages, and all the compliance related to it, and all the auditing records, and. So those are the use cases where this is most really most compelling.
Now, on the internet, from a business perspective, David, I see that your chief marketing officer, Tiana, she's all over the place talking about Factom and stuff. Do you guys have a sales team that runs out and contacts these different businesses to get them as customers to use Factom? Do you guys have your own sales team, or is just Tiana doing all the marketing, or how does that work?
Great question. So Tiana is one of the co-founders, has been with the company since the beginning. And man, she's been great about getting coverage and really teaching people what Factom's all about. She's led the opening of our California office. So you've probably seen her speak at a lot of conferences and do a lot of interviews. But a lot of the sales stuff is led by Peter and Abby. So Peter works really closely with our sales team and talks directly with customers. If you see on the website, Abby DeBall is our VP of business development, and he also meets with a lot of the customers. So, and we've been adding a few members to the sales team. So, yeah, we've got a growing sales team that meets directly with the enterprise customers, and you really have to have that kind of touch to develop these relationships, because these big companies, it's not like they can just show up on the website and they're gonna figure out exactly what solution they need. You really have to develop a relationship and do meetings directly with these folks. So yeah, we have a sales team that does a lot of traveling and goes all over the world and meets with customers. So
that was actually one of the things that got me interested in Factom, is that you guys were one of the first cryptocurrency companies or businesses that actually had a marketing officer, and actually had you guys were sales and marketing driven. And we saw more of you guys, pitching the software and introducing your software to people than any other cryptocurrency project out there. And most people don't realize this, but in order for a business to succeed, they have to have a strong marketing and sales team. That's what brings in the money into the business, because without money coming in, you guys are not going to be able to survive for very long. So that was one of the main reasons that we looked at, that Leon and I looked at you guys, because we were like, hey, these guys actually get it. They know that sales and marketing is what drives the product and the services that they have, not all the technical mumbo jumbo. I mean, you can do that with your developers and stuff, but to the outside world, you need to have a strong sales and marketing team to get customers. Otherwise, no one's going to use the software. And that's the problem that a lot of these cryptocurrency projects have, is that they focus on the technical stuff, and they believe that their programmers are technical gurus or whatever, and that people should just come and run and use their software just because they have good technical people. And they don't realize that you need to have a strong sales team out there getting customers for you.
Yeah, I like to say the quote that nobody ever used a product they didn't know existed. Right, that's really important, right? That doesn't happen. Like, if you don't know this, you physically cannot use it. I really appreciate that, and that's a good point. What we've tried to do is balance deep technical knowledge with Paul Snow and with Brian Deere, our chief scientist, and all the core developers that build the solid tech. But you have to have people that can articulate why people would use it, who would use it, and why it's different than what's out there today. And so it's been really rewarding. I've been a serial entrepreneur for 15 years and gone through a number of companies, and sometimes you're really tech heavy, but nobody out there that can really articulate it. And sometimes you've got a lot of marketing business people, but not folks that can really back them up with the technical development. So it's been really refreshing to have a good balance of that in Factom, where there's a strong technical depth, but there's also a strong business sales and marketing depth. And I was watching one of your earlier videos, and I really appreciated that you understood sort of the business viewpoint that we have. And in fact, you made a point about we're anchoring into multiple blockchains, right? And that this isn't, sort of a tribalism where, the one and only true Bitcoin. Like, we understand, and we need to have a practical outlook of, we're going to work with Ethereum, we're going to work with Bitcoin, we're going to work with multiple blockchains to secure all this data and add redundancy, because that really came out of these conversations we had with these big banks. Because you'll always have that skeptical guy that's like, well, what about when Bitcoin goes away?
Yeah.
Not a problem. We'll put it. You like Ethereum? We'll put anchors there. You like Ripple? We'll put anchors there, right? You got a private bank chain? Great. We'll add the same anchor in there. And what you end up with is this really redundant system where you'd have to be making some argument like the internet's going to go away for these apples to all of a sudden disappear, right? And if the internet goes away, we got bigger problems than Factom validation, right? Like that's a scenario that, then they say, okay, I get it. You're going to put this in a bunch of places, and whatever happens with the blockchain, there's always going to be a copy of this information we can validate. So that had to address their real concern. So.
Okay.
So what was the date? You said are we getting closer to the release date for Milestone 2?
We are definitely getting closer. The team hasn't put out an official date, but for those that have been following it on GitHub and compiling the latest code, they can see how close it is.
Okay.
We hope to be making an announcement soon about the release candidate and the public testnet and stuff like that. But nothing to announce today. We're really big believers in testing.
Sure.
So we have 2 full-time quality assurance experts that have done this for years and years and years on staff at our headquarters, and nothing gets shipped unless it's gone through QA. We try to remind people that this isn't a Facebook app. It's not photo sharing. It's not chat. We treat this as financial software. So we're really, really sensitive to only putting out stuff that has been robustly tested. Robert, who's listed on our website, is our head of QA, and he has literally hundreds of scripts that he runs every day against the Factom network, against the new software developing, to check that every potential edge case is working the way it should be. So our goal is not to be rushing. Our goal is to get it right. And not to have, attack vectors or things we haven't thought through or things like that. So I really give a lot of credit to Brian Deary and Paul Snow and the whole QA and core team that really robustly test this stuff. So I'll just say that anybody that looks at our GitHub can see how many commits are constantly going in. These guys at this point are putting in every weekend to get it pushed out.
One of the things that there's the Factom nonprofit and the Factom Factom Inc. for-profit. So so is Brian and Paul Snow, are they part of the Factom Foundation, or are they working for Factom Inc.? Like the people working, is there a separation between the two, or is it really just one and the same?
There is a separation. Paul, myself, and Peter sit on the board of directors for the Factom Foundation, which, for anybody that might be interested, is actually based in London. So we got a very friendly reception there with the folks that sort of vet new projects in London, and got the the type of sort of welcome we were looking for this type of nonprofit foundation to do with open source.
And the funding software comes from the crowd sale, the Factom ICO. Is that now?
So I remind people that from the software sale, it's actually based on the milestones.
Okay.
So only when we ship code by completing the milestone does any of the money from the software sale get unlocked. So September of last year, we unlocked milestone 1. Delivering milestone 2 will unlock that portion, and that's all held in a multi-signature escrow. With independent technical auditors that say whether we've met those milestones or not.
Okay.
So, and we published a lot about that.
So milestone 2 is actually being done by the foundation, not by Factom Inc.
So the best way to describe it, and Factom Inc. is a vanilla Delaware C Corp, right?
Yeah.
So the best way to describe it is the Mozilla Foundation.
Yeah, sure.
So for those that are familiar, Mozilla and
Firefox
is both a nonprofit and a for-profit. So they have different entities that work together. So the foundation for us really focuses on the open source, and all of that funding from the software sale goes to developing the open source and supporting developer evangelism, all the things to do with the open source network.
Sure.
And the for-profit is really about serving those enterprise customers. So we find that's a really good balance. To answer your question on the core developers, it depends on where the funding is coming from. Basically, the foundation is providing resources for the development of the open source, and sometimes that means developers are being provided by Factom Inc.
Okay, Factom Inc.
Yeah, on behalf of for the foundation. So we balance all that out, and the for-profit is essentially donating all the extra hours that the foundation, can't afford to hire such a big team, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so the Factom for-profit is basically donating this open source code.
So in other words,
resources
part of the financing that your next round that's coming is going to be a donation, quote unquote, to the Factom Foundation, because you guys actually need them to deliver milestone 2 for you to be able to get customers.
Yeah, it's a minority of the funding. We've got 3 or 4 folks that focus on the open source, and the rest of the technical team is really focused on customer support and developing the core products. So it's not a big chunk, but we'll definitely continue supporting the open source, and that's something we really believe in. And it also gives us an edge in the market, right? Anybody can build on Factom, but you might want to hire the guys that built the system and know the platform well.
Yeah, because basically what I know legally they may be 2 separate entities, but in fact, it's the same people in both, right? It's the same people that are
there's
working
crossover. It's not one for one, but there's definitely crossover, and that's what you want is you want people to be aligned between the different entities.
But if it's the same people, why do we need two entities? Why do we need a foundation and a for-profit? Why can't they just be one and the same then? If it's the same people,
it really boils down to a difference between equity and tokens. So tokens are really well held by a foundation. So forming the foundation, creating an entity that could create the initial open source and release the tokens to the community that were sold in the software sale. And that was a good vehicle for that. Whereas the for-profit didn't get any tokens as part of the initial Genesis block or any sort of reward. It's purely serving customers. So it's really just and you see this model a lot if you look at the Ethereum Foundation.
Yeah.
They chose a nonprofit, and there's a reason they did that. If you look at the Omni Foundation, they chose a nonprofit.
But they didn't have a separation like you guys used to.
Oh, sure they do.
They do.
Well, think about it. You have the foundation, and then you have for-profit companies like Consensus.
But they broke off. They
but have people commonly involved in.
Well, yes, a lot of them, but they.
So you've got this hybrid model where it's an open source foundation, and then you have a for-profit or many for-profits that people are building on top of the network. And so now there are lots of for-profits building on top of Ethereum.
That's correct.
Right, and that's what we want in Factom. There are plenty of for-profit companies now putting entries into Factom. Maybe it's not their core business, but it's now part of the product that they offer or the services that they do. And so we want to encourage that more and more developers. We like to say when 1,000 businesses flourish on Factom, like everybody wins.
Sure.
We're not trying to capture 90% of the market. We would be happy just to sort of serve the most valuable use cases that we think are the biggest pain points. And you can think of this as sort of the Google model that they've done with their App Store, right?
Sure.
Google doesn't make all the apps in the App Store. Of course not, right? You've got a huge army of developers that are putting them out. But they put out some of the most valuable applications. Maps, Gmail,
the core applications.
Core applications, right? But they've got an open platform where lots of people can participate. That's the inspiration that we're really trying to have.
Sure. So you want to build a platform that others can build off of.
Exactly.
Okay.
Hey, and David, what competitors do you guys have now in the record keeping and the data entry that you guys have right now? Are there any other cryptocurrency blockchain out there that's competing with you guys or even come close?
I don't know about decentralized systems that are really focused on that. What I try to emphasize to people is you have to understand that Factom is not an interpretive layer, like something like Ethereum, right? It's interpreting the code that's getting executed. Factom is just a blank piece of paper. You can publish any data you want on it. The protocol doesn't try to validate that data. You can put JSON or raw text or hashes or whatever you want into the layer, and that we think that's the right approach because we want people to interpret the data at the application layer instead of at the protocol layer. So I really haven't seen many projects sort of take that approach. Most people are sort of trying to bake in different features or different functionality into their core protocol. Factom is really focused simply on publishing the data, creating this chain architecture where you can create as many, Factom subchains as you need, easy scalability with looking at that directory layer and just validating your data instead of having to download everything. There are plenty of people, I would say more broadly, that as far as companies go, there are plenty of people that are doing proof of existence, right? Proofofexistence.com, the guys at Stampery. But I find a lot of them are really focused on consumer. So they want to serve the individual, that is, dumping in their birth certificate or, so the wedding documents or something that's, sort of low volume. Whereas for Factom, we've really ended up focusing mostly on enterprise customers and people that have these huge use cases. So I think that's pretty much what's differentiated us and why we use this Merkle tree structure to aggregate all of the entries versus, making an entry single thing that's published in our system. It doesn't end up as a Bitcoin entry, right? Because
is it safe to say, David, that that's the reason why you guys did never focus on like a consumer or end user wallet service or a client? Because you guys were more focused on businesses and enterprise level folks as your customers?
Yeah, we really want to focus on the enterprise folks, and yeah, that's part of why we haven't put a lot of energy into consumer-facing stuff, because it's not our audience, right? If somebody wants to make a couple of entries, we have tools that support that, but let other people focus on that. Sure. The pain point that we saw is we talked to big banks that were serious about using the blockchain, and they looked at us and they said, so we need to put about 1 billion entries a day for this one use case. Can we start with this one use case? We need to do 1 billion entries a day. And you have to explain to them that the blockchain, in its architecture with Bitcoin, right, that can handle 7 transactions a second, it's not going to handle a billion entries, right? Yeah. So we built Factom to address that problem. To be like, okay, here's a system. One, you probably don't need to put in 1 billion entries. You can aggregate them together in this structure, and you can, put in, entries every second or whatever. And you can efficiently anchor all of that data to the blockchain without shoehorning it in directly, right? And that's really key to understand, because this is why most of the industry is stuck in proof of concepts. Because when you only can move at the speed of the Bitcoin blockchain, all you can do is a proof of concept, because Bitcoin can handle, if you run that out for a day, Bitcoin can handle a couple 100,000 transactions per day. So any use case which would require even just millions of entries just is a non-starter, right? They get into the technical diligence and they're like, oh, it can't handle that. So all we can do is a proof of concept. So the cool thing with Factom is we're getting real world applications for production systems, because there's now, an effectively much higher threshold for how much data you can secure with the blockchain. That's a really big difference. So
there's no block size limit in Factom, is there? Like, can I, if I wanted to use factoids as a currency, could you do Visa level number of transactions on the Factom blockchain? I know factoids weren't designed to do that, but if let's say everyone started to use factoids to buy coffee.
I hope they don't. that's we're not trying to be all things to all people.
I understand, but
I get the question.
You guys are not going to be in business long if people use factoids to buy coffee at Starbucks. You guys are not going to be in business long.
That's not the purpose. But to answer your question, yes, we could support massive scale of data usage on something like a Visa.
A Visa network, yeah.
Yeah, and especially as we get into milestone 2, where you have a more robust federated network globally of all these different nodes and audit servers, you can really start to entertain that. But at some point, there's a threshold where it doesn't make sense to necessarily publish everything to the public network. Mm-hmm. And that, I think people get very emotional and tribalistic about public versus private blockchains. I think it's going to be yes and. I think it's going to be both, right? Because if you look at the internet today, not everything's on the public internet. There's space for intranets. There's space for private clouds. There's space for sort of everything between the public cloud and the private cloud and hardware you run yourself, right? And it all depends on your use case. So if somebody has 1 trillion entries, Factom can't handle that volume, What you need to be doing is essentially use an instance of Factom to aggregate that together and then publish to the public network, at a certain granularity. That are permission networks, and that they're anchoring into the public network, which is itself anchoring into the blockchain.
Yes. So we have a question. Can you talk about like the clients and their immediate value to businesses? I would think like any industry groups, like you talked about like financial data. So can you talk about the government, such as the Chinese government and the corruption? Are there certain industry groups you're focused on, like your sales and marketing team are focused on over others, let's say?
But like for example, David, if you had like if you can just get 3 industries or 3 businesses to just use Factom, what would it be?
That's a good question. And I think to answer the question that was asked, the immediate real-world value to their business has a lot to do with reducing auditing costs. So I would say the target industries are really those where the auditing costs have gone through the roof. So
financials, right?
For example, since the financial crisis, if you look at what banks are paying for auditing, some of them are reporting a tripling in cost for their auditing. And so that's not, a small pain point. That's a really big pain point. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars of auditing costs annually. And the new laws and regulations that have come into effect have just increased that ever more. And so
financials is a big one, right?
Yeah, financials is a big one because they're not going to be able to keep up with this. There's still very much a manual approach of looking at pieces of paper and checking the numbers. And all of a sudden you could speed that up to the speed of checking something with software. I think we have another question as well.
Yeah. How about like when I got my car title at the tax office,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like they have an antiquated system of records keeping too. Like I had to actually go home and print out an I-130 and take it back.
Yeah. So the question is about car titles and government titles and DMV and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. This can definitely be a way to speed up a lot of the systems, because what the main problem is if you look at the systems of record that a government uses, is every different department keeps its own system of record. So Paul Snow has talked about this a lot. And the federal level, it's something like 53 different systems of record. So if you need to make a decision about whether somebody is, qualified to have this license or that license or, this payment, it's not like one database. They got to go check 53 databases. And if any one of them happens to be down, well, we can't make a determination right now, come back later, right? Or they'll have to be, 24-hour delay, 1 week delay, or whatever is baked into the system.
I think government is a big part because they keep lots of records. So financials and government, I think, is one of the 2 major areas your sales teams in. I think that's fair to say.
I'd say that's fair to say. And we've announced a lot of that, because I think that's a use case where solving the system of record problems, and it also, there's a lack of trust there. Even outside of the US, there's a lot of lack of trust in the developing world around land titles and things like that, because the systems that keep the records just aren't that great, right? I think you highlighted this yourself, Ty, when you were talking in your Factom discussion about what happened in Vietnam, right? People, the government came in and said, well, now it's all public lands, sorry, and they came back later and said, oh, that didn't work out so well. Let's give everybody their private property back, but who do we give it to, right? Because the records weren't of really good quality, and if the records were lost or nothing was getting updated during this period, you had a lot of confusion over who owned what. And so we sort of take for granted in the first world that that's a solved problem. That is not a solved problem in a lot of the world. And so I think that's what the caveat I would say is the tough thing and the thing people have to understand is those projects take a lot of time. and they can only move as fast as the government involved. So we sort of expect weekly updates in the crypto space. Those are multi-year projects, right? That is like a really heavy lift.
Such as the Honduras thing that's
Sure.
on.
And that's been moving forward, but it's 9 parts political and it's 1 part technical, right? To get all the proper authorizations and go through the review process. And in some cases, depending on the country, there are legislative acts that have to be passed, or, detailed reviews for new contracts. And so, that's sort of been a learning experience for us, and a part of why we've shifted focus from land titles as sort of a core primary focus, because we realized how long those projects are. They'll be wonderful once they're finally implemented, but it might be a 5-10 year lift to see some of those government projects get implemented. So hopefully it's driven by them rather than us. That they're asking for this solution and they're seeking out this solution and they're pushing it, because if you're trying to push it, then it's just a really time-consuming process. So good to understand expectations. And as a for-profit, we want to focus on the areas where there's more immediate traction and more.
You gotta make money, right?
You gotta make money. But the cool thing is, because it's open source at the bottom, nothing prevents anybody else from coming in and saying, oh, I can implement that here, and I've got the right, I know the right people, and I know how to explain it to them in this jurisdiction, right? That's the great thing, is we're not a bottleneck in that process. We'll put out tools, we'll put out code, we'll encourage a lot of people to do that, even if it's not part of our core business.
All right, Ty, I think, is there anything else?
No, that's all the questions I have, regarding the business side of it. I still like the idea that, me personally, I still like the idea that out of all the cryptocurrencies, Factom is the only one that has like an actual sales team and a marketing team. And, I come from a background. And customers, paying customers. That's the most important thing, Nothing kills a business or a project faster than no customers, no paying customers. Free customers do not help a business survive. So, but that's all the questions I have. If you guys have any, questions, guys, on from the audience out there, just type it in, what city you're in, and the question, and I'll get them answered. If not, then we'll wrap it up. It seems like we have a. The one thing that you said that was not very clear, and I noticed that there was a lot of questions on it earlier, was that the date of milestone 2. And it seems to me that you guys at this moment don't have an exact date yet. But do you guys have like a timeline or a time frame, like towards the end of the year or early next year, that you guys are going to complete milestone 2?
I'll just say that our real emphasis is, rather than announcing a date or setting a lot of expectations, is we want to get the code right, and we want it to be really, really robust when it goes out. And so, rather than sort of driving toward an arbitrary date, where it's really code and robustness driven. So after every line of code is passed quality assurance, and we've had we're running. I'll give a little context. Is close enough that we're running a test net right now.
Okay.
So it is operational today, feature complete on a test net in our own QA. The next step is a public test net. So we want to invite, as soon as we feel it's a certain level of stability, we're going to invite the community in, run your own node, join the test net, hit it with a lot of hit it with a lot of entries. Let's really run it through its paces. And then we go to
the public testnet. When the public testnet gets launched, we know we're getting closer.
Sure. Okay. So because when you have a public testnet, you basically have a release candidate.
Yeah, that's right.
And a release candidate is, this is feature complete. We think it's right, but let's test the heck out of it before we go to production. And so that for those that have seen releases of Bitcoin, they kind of know that progression between the code's done. The code's in testnet, the code's in a public testnet, and now it gets this version, this release candidate is anointed the final production one. So that's kind of the process. But as soon as we have something to announce on that, we'll start inviting. We have a lot of testers that are on our Skype channel or follow the project, and so every time we release something new, they've been great about helping us test that. So we'll definitely include the community in that process as soon as we announce the testnet.
Okay, so we only have one question, one last question from the audience, and then we can wrap it up, David. We have Shaka Daniel from the channel, the YouTube channel Chase That Coin. He's broadcasting from out of New York City, and he asked, "Hey, is the when someone creates an entry into the Factom network, is it something that they can do with one factoid, or is it something that every entry has to be one factoid? Like, for example, like Bitcoin can be split up into 100 million satoshis. Can how does that work with Factom?"
Great question. We actually call them factoshis, and and they are 100 millionth of, so 8 decimal points, just like Bitcoin, of a factoid. So yes, you can break them into lots of tiny pieces for convenience, but it's important to note that the conversion rate is set by the network, especially as we get to milestone 3. This is sort of dynamically set by the federated servers, but today it's roughly a tenth of a penny. So if you look at the price of a factoid, and this gets adjusted periodically, but when it was $1 a factoid, you get about 1,000 entry credits per factoid.
Now you get 3,000.
Now, I don't know if the network has been updated yet, but yeah, the conversion rate will rise depending on the exchange rate. And so, yes, you can make a lot of entries for a single factoid, depending on what the price of a factoid is. And the reason for that is, again, we wanted to separate the token that trades at whatever value it is today versus the, okay, I can make 1K of data of entries with this entry credit. And so for companies, for practical business use, they just want to know how many entries they can make, right? They're probably going to kind of keep factoids on their book. They're probably going to turn them into entry credits.
It's kind of the same way I think how BitShares pegs like a BitUSD to a US dollar by varying the number of BitShares that equate to that, using a system like a reporting network, right? It's kind of you're sort of like, except you're pegging like an entry credit. You're in essence an entry credit, one entry credit. You're pegging it to 1/10 of a cent, right? That's what you're doing with these entry credits.
That's one analogy, and that might be helpful for folks familiar with BitShares. But maybe that's more similar to a contract for a difference. I would best compare this to gas in Ether.
Ether, okay.
Right, because that's their anti-spam mechanism. This is partly what it is for Factom, is because there's a cost to publish to the network, you don't get just tons of random spam because there's some
cost, there's some value.
There's some value, there's some cost. If there wasn't that cost, people could just attack the network and put a quadrillion entries in and basically spam the server until it falls over. So there has to be a cost, and you want it to be a native token, because if you were creating a Bitcoin transaction every time there was an entry, now you'd be flooding the Bitcoin network with tiny Bitcoin transactions. And that is against the point. We're trying to scale, the blockchain. So I would compare it to gas in Ether, or the spam, anti-spam mechanism in Bitcoin is the dust level. Right? Is you can't send less than whatever it is today, 555 Satoshis.
That's right.
And so this is really a similar function for entry credits in the Factom system. And that's an important question, because people say, oh, well, why do you even need a token? But that's the answer and then finally, on the decentralized side, you want the software to pay the hardware. And so there's no factoid reward for running a factoid server right now. We're not rewarding ourselves. The nodes in milestone 2 won't be rewarded. But when we get to the elections in milestone 3, federated servers will start getting paid by the software, by the network, through new factoids to the people running those federated servers. So that takes the checkbook out of our hands or anybody else's hands.
So as of now, 8.7 million is
that's it.
That's it until milestone 2.
Until milestone 3.
Until milestone 3
goes live.
Okay, so even in milestone 2,
there'll be no inflation.
So 8.7 million is the fixed number of factoids that will be in existence till milestone 3.
Till milestone 3 goes live, and the federated servers start getting. And that's an important note, and understand how the dynamics of this.
Right, and that's important for us investors and speculators, is knowing the supply and the future supply.
Right. Yeah. So, and that was all. There's a lot of details if you look at the consensus paper, which is available on the Factom GitHub account.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
That's great.
And just to be clear, one entry is 1 kilobyte.
That's right. That's exactly it. And people can organize them and do what they want. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, and you use a certain number of entry credits to make a chain, and then you can make individual entries with 1 entry credit. So that's the way the system, off the top of my head, I think it's 10 entry credits to create a chain, and then individual entry credits to put that 1K of data in. And that's important because having these individual chains with unique IDs is how you can easily organize and validate small amounts of data without having to download gigabytes and gigabytes of information.
Hey,
Okay.
So to wrap things up here, David, we didn't want to break any SEC rules and ask you any investor related questions publicly. But if someone wants to reach out to you or learn more about Factom Incorporated, the company itself, and not the factoids that's being traded on the exchanges, can they reach out to you privately? And is that possible, or is that prohibited?
Not from seeing this podcast. We're already we're good to go on investors for Series A, so we don't need to. Yeah, we're already in a good position there. So this isn't to find new people. This is sort of just educational about the company, and customers can certainly reach out to us and build a relationship with us, and we hope that they do, or developers that see this can check it out, or people that want to apply to join Factom. But we're good on the investment front. I'm very happy about how our fundraising has gone, and so yeah, we're good on that front.
Okay. All right. So if you're watching this, do not contact them about the investing in Factom Incorporated. You can contact them about doing business with them as Factom Incorporated, or if you're a developer and you feel that you can help them develop the software, you're welcome to reach out to them. Definitely, they'll definitely need a lot of salespeople to reach out to businesses to get them to use the Factom software, but no need for investors. Okay. So anything else, Leon, before we wrap it up?
Nope. I think I'm good here. That's great.
Okay. So thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope that this session with David, the chairman of Factom Incorporated, has helped you guys learn more about Factom. If you guys want to follow David or his announcements about Factom, you can follow him at factom.com/blog, or you can go and follow him on his Twitter, which is at Johnston. Let me see here. It's D Johnston, and I'll leave it in the description below, guys, so you guys don't have to spell it. But it's D Johnston EC, and you can follow him on Twitter. Okay. So thanks for watching this video, guys, and give us a thumbs up if you guys like it, and give us a thumbs down if you guys don't like it, so we don't waste time making it. Okay. And this will conclude and end the broadcast, guys. So thanks, Leon, and thanks, David.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm gonna stop the broadcast now.